States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Joe or somebody, can you close that door, because when we use the timer, I can't get to it. Thank you. And I gotta clear it.
I will call to order this meeting of the Milton Planning Commission at 7:05. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I am George Ragsdale. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council to public hearings and making recommendations on rezonings, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan map, and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. I'd like to introduce the members that are here tonight. To my left is Commissioner Paul Moore, Commissioner Gary Burchett, Commissioner Chris Doty, Commissioner Mark Bittner, and Commissioner Joe Kramer. The petitions are going to be heard in the order and sequence that they're listed on the posted agenda. I need to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for conducting the meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present their petition. The applicant may choose to save some of that time for rebuttal following the presentation by any opposition. The opposition will also be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position, and if the time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is ultimately on the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains within the allotted 10 minutes. The community development staff will be keeping track of time when the clock's up on the wall and will inform you periodically of any time remaining on your presentation. If you haven't done so already and you wish to speak tonight, please fill out a speaker card and turn it in to Robin before you approach the podium. We'll ask that all speakers identify themselves by name, address, and if you're speaking on behalf of any organization, identify that as well. When an opponent of a rezoning action is made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the City of Milton that's going to consider the application, it should be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to this meeting. If you have not done so, we would recommend that you have someone else speak on your behalf. Failing to do so is a violation of relevant state statute and does constitute a misdemeanor. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site, and the matter has been advertised, and the notice has been mailed to property owners affected by the zoning as required by the ordinance. Our recommendations tonight will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition at a hearing that will be held approximately 3.5 weeks from this hearing on the third Monday of each month at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external. Their recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, and those recommendations have been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstrations of any sort within the chamber are prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue, or outburst. Please, if you would, turn off all cell phones and or silence them. Any remarks that you have should be addressed to the Planning Commission, please. If you have anything you'd like to submit for our review, please do so through the community development staff. Finally, if your petition is deferred tonight for any reason, you will be required to update or obtain a new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay. Having said all that, we will open the meeting for public comment. This is the time of the meeting when anybody who's here can comment on anything that is not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who would like to comment, speak, ask a question, or whatever? Seeing none, I'd like a motion to close public comment.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous. First item is approval of the minutes from the meeting of May 22nd. They were distributed and are in front of us. Are there any corrections that need to be made? Mr. Kramer?
No.
Did you notice my special notation of when Mr. Doughty came in?
Yes, I did.
So that next time you guys see, our previous commissioner, you can tell them that I do it to everybody.
Does he think you singled him out?
He does.
Well, But, you know, Chris isn't notoriously late.
Exactly. I'm not a habitual offender.
Okay, hearing no changes or corrections, we need a motion to approve.
A motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Robin, first item, please.
Okay, the first item is, RZ 12-07, BC 1204, Red Road North Side, frontage 1,083.97 feet by Red Road Property LLC. This item was deferred at the May 22nd meeting to tonight's meeting, and is a request to rezone from AG1 agricultural to CUP, community unit plan, to develop an 11-unit single-family subdivision and develop a 15-unit single-family subdivision and a 4-part concurrent variance to reduce the 50-foot setback for a new street 10 feet along the east and west property lines, to delete the curb and gutter and sidewalks for all roads within subdivision. Actually, it's a 3-part concurrent variance because previous requests have been withdrawn prior to advertising, so that's my correction. Late yesterday, I believe the applicant submitted a letter to ask for another deferral based on the fact that within the report, you'll see that their request was for a 10-foot separation between the adjacent property and the road, and staff has noted it needs to include the right-of-way as part of that dimension, and so they're requesting a deferral to be correctly advertised. But we're ready and willing to do a staff presentation. It's up to you, whatever needs is here.
Public hearing has been advertised.
And the public hearing, we need to have a public hearing since it's been advertised.
Is the applicant here?
Yes, he is.
Okay. I would say let's just go ahead.
Okay.
What do you guys think?
And we're here.
Yep.
Yeah. Pardon me?
Yeah, what'll happen is that staff will present, and then the applicant will, and then you'll get 10 minutes. Each side gets 10 minutes.
No.
No,
No,
they
we're
just
gonna
want
hear the
to-
case first.
Yeah.
We decide not to defer.
And I'm going to speak from here because it's easier to switch the PowerPoint from here. Okay, and what you have in front of you obviously is the site plan showing the proposed development, which is on the north side of Red Road, also known as the Bentwood subdivision.
Kathy, for clarity, what we have in front of us is the previously approved site plan, right?
No, I'm sorry, this is a revised site plan that was submitted. It
With
should
10
say
with-
June 14th.
With
10 lots?
With 10
Yeah.
lots?
You don't have some, let me
What's
see.
on the screen was the one that had 10
Yes, I'm
lots.
sorry, that was just a location map.
Okay.
We did, yes, that was just a
That's what I was
location
talking
with
about.
platted, and
Sorry.
that's what's on the tax record.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what is.
Right,
got it.
and it's not the site plan, you're correct, yeah.
Okay. But we have a proposal to change that. The subject site contains 26.13 acres. There is an approximate 8-acre lake on the site. The applicant seeks a rezoning to CUP, which stands for Community Unit Plan, for 15 lots. Currently, the site is developed for 12 lots and is zoned AG1 agriculture with shared driveways and water service. There is a platted subdivision developed with flag lots and shared driveway easements as it currently exists.
Kathy, I don't want to interrupt you, but just the screen and everything we have says 10. Is it 10 or 12 that's currently zoned, developed, I mean?
It's 10 lots.
10.
Okay.
It was originally way back 8, it was 10, then they actually originally asked for 18, they came down to 15. So
Okay.
those are the three numbers that have been in play.
Okay.
Okay, again, back to the existing zoning, there are the 10 subdivision lots, so subdivided lots. There's a picture of the subject site looking toward the lake. This is the revised site plan submitted on June 14, 2012. And this, I believe, reflects the 10 lots.
10 or 15.
The 15.
Is this the 10 or the 15?
This is
This is the
15.
15.
Proposed 15.
This is the 15, I'm sorry.
Let's make sure. There may be an 18 one.
Yeah, it's not 18, it's 15.
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm getting confused too. 15, this is what's before us, is 15.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we've done the site plan analysis, and the requested development standards for a CUP are as follows. Minimum lot area per unit shall be 1 acre. Minimum lot width, 100 feet. Minimum front yard setback, 60 feet. Minimum side yard setback, 10 feet. Minimum rear yard setback, 50 feet. Minimum building separation, 20 feet. Minimum heated floor area, 3,000 feet. To continue, the minimum perimeter setback for the development shall be 10 feet. Staff notes that the applicant did not indicate the setback, but it is based on the revised site plan submitted on June 14, 2012. The maximum height, no building shall exceed 40 feet, based on the CUP development standards.
Kathy, let me stop you again, if I could, just again for clarity. The presentation that you got on the screen says that the minimum building separation is 20 feet. The document we have says 10, which is correct?
The 20, it was incorrect citation on the report, so
Okay.
I'm correcting it to be 20
Okay.
feet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so finish with that. Next slide. Other site plan considerations include the proposed streets currently developed as shared driveways are located along the east and west property lines. The zoning ordinance requires that new streets, both public and private, must be located a minimum of 50 feet from any peripheral property line adjoining AG1 and residential zone property unless interparcel access is required. This dimension includes the right-of-way as well as the paved portion of the road. The current site plan does not meet this requirement. Another requirement is that streets are constructed with curb and gutter and sidewalks for all roads within the subdivision. The applicant is requesting that these requirements be deleted. Therefore, the requested concurrent variance, parts 1 and 2, to reduce the 50-foot setback for a new street to 10 feet along the east and west property lines. There are currently 5 flag lots currently platted along the east property line. There are 4 flag lots currently platted along the west property line. One lot utilizes Red Road as its legal lot frontage. Therefore, that's 10. Both the eastern and western lots utilize shared paved driveways to access each of the lots. The applicant has not demonstrated that there are extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of this zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the applicant. The existing platted subdivision demonstrates that the existing lots can be accessed via shared driveways in lieu of creating new streets. Therefore, staff recommends denial of parts 1 and 2. If the council chooses to approve parts 1 and 2 of the concurrent variance, the condition should require the applicant to provide a 10-foot setback from the property line to the right-of-way line along both the east and west property lines. Requested concurrent variance, part 3, which is to delete the curb and gutter and sidewalks for all roads within the subdivision. The applicant has requested the concurrent variance based on the fact that the existing shared driveways, not streets, do not have curb and gutter and sidewalks, and that they are not necessary for the development. It is staff's opinion that by adding 5 additional lots and upgrading the driveways to street standards, the requirement for curb and gutter is necessary to provide additional drainage to the development. Although the streets are private, they must conform to city standards for streets. Without the curb and gutter, the applicant would be required to install a rural section that includes a ditch and shoulder on either side of the ditch. This would require right-of-way width larger than a traditional curb and gutter design. It appears that there would not be adequate width to provide a rural section for the 2 streets. The applicant has not demonstrated that there are extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of this zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the applicant. The existing platted subdivision demonstrates that by not creating a new street, the existing lots can be accessed via shared driveways. Therefore, staff recommends denial of Part 3 of VC 12-04. Other site plan considerations. This is in regard to septic permits. The minimum lot size for a lot serviced by a septic tank is 1 acre of usable area. The following is Fulton County's definition of usable area. Usable area shall be the total area in a lot that is determined by the health department to be suitable for installation of an on-site sewage management system, including the reserve area. The area shall not include any bodies of water, floodplains, easements, etc., except those portions that would be precluded for use by this article via minimum separation distance requirements. Staff has contacted the Fulton County Health Department regarding the rezoning requests, and they requested plans to determine if the lots are suitable for installation of a septic system, along with the soil data from a certified soil scientist. And so we are not privy to any plans that have been submitted to the county, nor have we heard from the county in regard to this issue. In regard to environmental site analysis, the environmental site analysis report is sufficient and satisfies the requirement of Section 64-2126. The applicant states in the ESA that the tree survey was filed with the previous plat for the subject site and is on file with the city. Staff notes that a tree survey is not a requirement of a plat, and the city does not have a tree survey. A tree survey must be provided to be in compliance with the required items for rezoning application. Staff notes that all trees 15-inch in diameter or greater will need to be surveyed. In regard to the Fulton County Board of Education, staff did not receive updated information for 15 units, but for a single-family development with 18 units, which was the original amount that was requested. So we did get a report based on the original 18, but not on the 15, so we're using the 18 tonight. With the 18, we would expect approximately elementary school students 6, middle school students 2, high school students 4, with a total students of 12. This development will be located in the Summit Hill Elementary School, Northwestern Middle School, and Cambridge High School zones for the 2012-13 school year. Public involvement. In regard to the DRB, they were concerned with the long-term issues of the lake. They would like the applicant and the homeowners to work together to find something that will work for everyone, and they suggest adding some sort of landscape buffer along the edge of the road. The CZIM meeting was held on April 25th, 2012, and the applicant was present at the meeting held at City Hall. There were a total of 11 people in attendance. There was a public participation meeting that the applicant hosted at the Kroger Community Room on May 8th, 2012. There were 18 citizens in attendance. The consensus of the neighbors was that they were opposed to the original 18 lots, as well as the most recently proposed 15-lot subdivision, and wanted the site to remain at 10 lots. The following were their concerns. Concerned that the CUP zoning category will open the door for high-density and or attached housing in the area. They were concerned about the density of the development and the subsequent effects, including such items as noise and traffic. And they were concerned about the reduction of property values. In regard to the required standards of review that staff must undertake on all rezonings, it is determined that although the proposed 15-lot single-family residential subdivision developed at a density of 0.574 unit per acre is consistent with nearby properties, the increased number of lots from 10 to 15 does not meet the development requirements for streets and possibly the approval of septic for the lots. It is staff's opinion that the proposal may adversely affect existing use or usability of the adjacent properties as depicted in the map and chart, based on the fact that the applicant cannot develop streets to the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The subject site does have a reasonable use, currently zoned AG1 agriculture with an approved subdivision plat for 10 lots. And this is the existing map and chart that talks about the fact that that the applicant cannot develop streets to the requirements of the zoning ordinance. This is the existing uses map, excuse me. And this shows the existing uses that relate to the map. Standards of review. The staff does not anticipate a significant impact on public services, utilities, or schools as proposed. Comments from the Fulton County Board of Education are included in the report as it relates to the estimated number of new students for each type of school. The applicant has requested concurrent variances to reduce the setback for streets adjacent to peripheral property lines and to delete curb and gutter and sidewalks. The additional 5 lots may cause an increase in runoff into the streets. The proposed development is inconsistent with the following plan policies: to encourage the development that is sensitive to the overall setting of the community and contributes to the community's character and sense of place. That requires that our new and reconstructed roadways be appropriately designed using context-sensitive design considerations to enhance community aesthetics and to minimize environmental impacts and accommodate multiple functions where appropriate. Continuing along with the standards of review, the proposed development is consistent with adjacent and nearby zonings and development. It is consistent with the future land use plan, which shows the subject site is low-density residential. But by increasing the number of lots from 10 to 15, concurrent variances will be required to meet the development standards for the site. In addition, by increasing the lot count, there appears not to be adequate area for septic systems because a large percentage of each of the lots areas is located in the lake or stream buffers. The increased number of lots will also impact the number of trees to be preserved in the site. The issues stated above are grounds for recommended disapproval for the proposed CUP zoning developed with 15 single-family residential units. Recommended conditions. If the Planning Commission chooses to approve the petition, specific conditions are attached at the end of the staff report on pages 17 through 19. Conclusion. Although the proposed development is consistent with adjacent and nearby residential developments in the area, the applicant has not demonstrated a hardship that is not self-imposed, and the site plan does not meet the development standards for street, curb, and gutter and sidewalks. Therefore, staff recommends denial of RZ 12-07 to rezone from Agricultural 1, Agricultural to CUP Community Unit Plan, and VC 12-07 Parts 1 through 3 to develop 15 single-family lots. That is my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Would the applicant care to make a presentation?
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Ethan Underwood. I'm with the Lipscomb Johnson firm out of Cumming, Georgia. Our address is 112 North Main Street in Cumming. We're representing Red Road LLC. We're coming to you tonight, as stated, asking for a rezoning application. I won't gild the lily in any way or beat around the bush with you. The question that we've been asked by the neighbors is, say, well, why are you coming back and asking for a rezoning? You got an AG1 zoning, and you can put 10 lots on it. And the simple answer to that is our client is seeking to be able to maximize the use of the property. Now, the response we typically get is, well, it's not the City of Milton's job to try to maximize your gain. No, that's true. But under Georgia law, property owners are entitled to the highest and best use of their property, provided we comply with local land use regulations. So that's what we want to attempt to demonstrate to you, that we do comply with the comprehensive plan for the City of Milton, what was intended. But we have two problems that we'll have to overcome. And candidly, it's whether or not you all are comfortable with variances to facilitate that. The two problems that we have is when this property was originally developed, it was developed with flag lots. It's got driveways that are already there. So there's two driveways on the east and west side of the property, and there's a lake. Now neither, or I guess none of the three of these, the two driveways or the lake, is immovable. And I think that's one of the key parts of the staff's reviews is they said, well, we're not supportive of your zoning because we're not supportive of your variances, and you need your variances to keep your roads as they are. We think it makes sense to leave the roads where they are because they are the locations of the existing drive are the most protective of the lake as possible. We could relocate them. It costs some money, but it could be relocated so that the variances for the side yards are not necessary. But what that requires is you to relocate the roads closer to the lake. And as we all know, whenever you have impervious surface closer to the lake, that's just that much more pollutants that can get into it. The other option that my client has, and we don't like it, but again, you have to look at the economics of the deal, is the lake size does not have to stay what it is. It can be reduced. We think it makes more sense to try to leave the lake as it is and leave the roads where they are as far away as possible from them. And for that reason, we think that a variance in the zoning application is better than the alternative than saying, well, you guys are zoned AG1, go do what you can with AG1. The AG1, under the zoning category, only requires 100-foot wide lots, only 1 acre lots. We've got 26 acres, and there's no minimum home size that can be put on that. We've worked with the neighbors. We've made offers, and we'll make the same offer to the Planning Commission. We're willing to put minimum home size in order to guarantee certain caliber of homes that are put there, but obviously we need the variance to facilitate the zoning application. As stated, the variance is requested. We filed what we were advised to when we met for our pre-application meeting. We've now been told that we actually need a larger variance because the existing driveways are 10 feet from the sides. So now that the city's informed us that we also have to have right-of-way on the sides, it may require an additional, an increase in the variance size. That's an issue, I guess, that will just have to be taken care of with the city attorney and with the Community Development Department. But what's being proposed, this was the initial site plan. It was an 18-lot site plan. And the squares are shown where the home size, or I'm sorry, the home sites are in front of them, and the large squares were the proposed septic areas. Now, we've been in discussions with Fulton County as to what is usable space, and quite frankly, they're not quite sure what they can tell us. So we've had a disagreement as to whether or not the buffers are unusable. What we do know is that we've blocked off 1,500 square feet, which is more than adequate for a septic system as well as a replacement septic system. Now, the rest of it is designed for filtration. You just got to have dirt to make these systems work. So whether that's subject to an impervious setback or a buffer, we don't think that it's certainly not going to affect the functioning of a septic system. And we believe it complies with Fulton County's health laws. However, we did discover that we do need some additional room compared to what was originally proposed, and we've reduced the size down and proposed a CUP zoning with 15 homes. There are, as stated, significant wetlands on the property, and we think it makes sense from an environmental standpoint to try to stay as far away from that with the roads. It also makes sense from a design standpoint to not do curb and gutter. You've actually seen more studies coming out of the University of Georgia and other places that are supporting rain gardens and allowing the drainage to infiltrate rather than be collected in storm sewers and infiltrated out through detention ponds. Now, the concern about the additional impervious surface draining toward the road, well, the roads are actually at the high spots, so the drainage is actually going to be going back toward the lake. Everything falls toward the lake. That's the low spot of the property. So there's no need for gutters, and in fact, with these 75-foot impervious surface setbacks and the buffers, which we're not asking for any variances to, all those will be preserved, and that will be able to handle the increased impervious surface from the homes that are proposed. Now, the next question is, well, does this even comply with the City of Milton's master plan? And yes, in the central Milton district, it's specific, and this is just a plain old cut and paste straight out of the book that says that CUP zoning is an appropriate zoning designation. So we do feel that we're complying with the intent of the central Milton character area. And in fact, it states specifically that equestrian estates, which many of our neighbors have, are intended to coexist with low-density residential use. And the low-density residential is defined as 1 acre lots or larger. Every lot in this subdivision will be at least 1 acre. Again, new development must match typical densities. We're coming at 0.57 units to the acre. Again, well under the requirements to be categorized as low density. Again, emphasizing significant site features, such as view sheds, environmentally sensitive areas. I mean, it's describing the lake in the middle of this property. And then finally, the housing opportunities objective in the comp plan says that you want to have a significant amount of residential development with a mix of lot sizes. Everything doesn't have to be a large equestrian-style lot as long as you meet that 1 acre minimum. It actually provides a different housing choice while still protecting the character of the area. Other CUP zonings, they range in multiple sizes throughout the Central Milton character area. You can see the star in the center of the diagram is our proposed location. It's surrounded by other CUP zonings. Some of them are small, some of them are large. And this is just another to show the light green color are the CUP zonings.
You have 3 minutes remaining.
Thank you. Again, our community goals, none of this happens in a vacuum. You don't just want to come in and run roughshod over the neighbors. The intent is to try to work with the neighbors and make this something that they're proud of, that protects their property values. Again, we believe this is a compatible zoning category. The site plan that we've presented, we feel preserves the intent and in fact exceeds the minimum requirements of AG1 zoning. And then two, the zoning conditions, we're willing to agree to zoning conditions so that we can provide surety to the neighbors. We're just asking for some kind of a willy-nilly zoning. We'll say, well, go do what you want to. We're agreeable to zoning conditions as far as home sizes, architectural standards, so that folks have some idea of, say, you know, this is what is coming next door to me. Again, preserving nearby property values and protecting the environmental features. Projected price point on these homes, with lots with homes, is $750,000. And we believe, again, that leaving the roads where they are is the best protection environmentally for the lake. With that, I will reserve the remainder of my time.
Okay.
Okay. I have 2 cards.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak in favor of the application? Okay. Anyone would like to speak in opposition?
Yes, I have 3 speakers.
Okay.
First one is Tony Shepard. If you can come up and give your name and address.
My name's Tony Shepard. I'm a resident at 710 Nettlebrook Lane. We're in the property adjoining to the east of the applicant's property. We respectfully request a denial of the requested delay and an overall rejection of the requested spot zoning and variances for the following reasons. Spot zoning and variances are not in line with the spirit or the intent of the Milton 2030 Comprehensive Plan for the Central Milton character area. Increased density is not the goal. Spot zoning and variances are not in keeping with existing zoning and setbacks of surrounding properties. All the properties adjacent to and immediately surrounding this property are zoned AG1. This is the first such zoning request from AG1 to CUP, and as stated, it only serves to increase the density. Bentwater, they originally installed curbs, sidewalks, and gutters on Red Road to make it look nice, but they've not done anything within the subdivision itself. There's been some debate on the driveways or streets. The applicant's variance submitted called them roads, and in various meetings they've called them streets, so it's unclear to us exactly what they are, but we do know that they're kind of an eyesore. The existing driveways sit within 7 to 8 feet of the existing property lines, and there's no area for a vegetative buffer at all. The original plan showed 10 lots, and if you factor out the property located within the setbacks and the detention pond boundaries, some of the buildable space is probably less than 1 acre. And with the applicant requesting 15 lots, I'm not sure how a septic system could even be placed on some of these lots. The spot zoning and variances requested are purely economic here. The zoning and variances based on economic factors are not justified in that a unique hardship does not exist for this applicant if the existing ordinances were to be strictly applied. Other subdivisions in the area that started and stopped during the economic downturn did not request rezoning or variances to offset their economic conditions. Cananero is an example. They started, they stopped, they resumed. One house was originally built, then they resumed. They didn't come to you guys and request variances. They have curbs, they have sidewalks, they have AG1 zoning, construction in that subdivision has resumed. Five Oaks is another example. Started, stopped, and they've resumed. They did not request variances. They have curbs, sidewalks, and AG1 zoning. We shouldn't be required to mitigate this developer's bad business decisions. They knew what the property was zoned when they bought it. They've had it for some period of time. So their request for zoning is purely economic here. Basically, this applicant wants you to grant them a pass so they don't have to do what all the other developers before them were required to do, and in fact did, which was comply with the spirit and the intent of the zoning. For this and the other reasons stated, we feel that the request should be denied and the zoning for the original 10 lots remain AG1 with all required setbacks. We also feel that if the applicant does decide to go forward with this, that the streets or driveways, as they've indicated, be made to comply with the existing zoning requirements and setbacks and brought up to standard for the City of Milton. Now, as a rebuttal, the applicant's representative had stated that the street were not near the lake. The original property, the house was actually near the lake, and there was a street that cut down near the lake, so it is possible to do that. The applicant had also indicated that they wanted and were willing to work with the neighbors, but upon repeated requests for the applicant to attend a meeting with us, they failed to attend a single meeting. They've sent representatives each and every time, even though they live in the Alpharetta area. They have no ties to the City of Milton. They do not live in the City of Milton. And quite honestly, it was a little frustrating to the folks in the area that the developer would not even show up and talk to us for this. So for this matter, we would, again, request that you deny the deferral and that you would also deny the request in total. Thank you.
The next person to speak is Andrew Robbie. And you have 5.5 minutes along with the other lady, so
Sure.
that's a total of 10.
Okay, my name is Andrew Robbie. I'm a resident at 310 Oak Branch Court, representing the Nettlebrook Farm subdivision. I just really wanted to say that when I moved to Milton 10 years ago and I moved into a wonderful new neighbourhood, Nettlebrook Farms, very impressed with the neighbourhood, the rural elements. And when I looked at this definition of what the community use planning, it horrified me basically in terms of, multi-family dwellings, triplex, duplex, all new terms to me coming from the UK, but now I understand what that means. And when I look at some of the issues and the things we've had in our neighbourhood with water and drainage, and look at that subdivision with the lake, I really feel that if we start to put more and more lots on that side of space, it's just going to be a recipe for disaster. So really, as a neighbour who has an investment in a property, I don't want to see my property price eroded based on the decision to support this revenue maximisation from a developer. So I really would like to propose that the rezoning be rejected based on the fact that it's not in the spirit of Milton. It's not why I moved to Milton. I would really like to see the rural atmosphere protected. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Kathy Samaria.
We're going to have a fourth one, Rob.
Yeah, fourth, okay. Yeah, you can go ahead.
And I think we have one more yellow card, so I'll be really quick. My name's Kathy Samaria. I live at 1740 Red Road. So I live right smack on the east side of the property where they want to put 9 lots. Do I need to say anything more? That driveway, like Tony said, is not 10 feet. There is absolutely no space. It's only 7 feet from our property line, and our house is 50 feet from their property line. I would ask that you deny this request altogether, everything, deny the deferral, deny the whole thing. It doesn't. We moved on our 6 acres for the rural area of Milton. We've lived in Milton for 10 years, and we want to keep it the way you guys have designed Milton to be. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ed Parsons.
Go ahead, sorry.
Some of you guys. Is there anything else I need to fill out on there?
No, it's
Good?
fine.
Okay.
Just your
I
address.
live at 1760 Red Road, just probably within 150 feet of where these guys are proposing the development. Although I respect the rights of landowners to develop, their land that is consistent with the development standards and the zoning in place, I don't think this is an appropriate case where you need to consider something. They want to change the zoning, they want to change the zoning classifications, and I just don't think it's consistent with what the standards are, the development standards are that we want for this area. So I just encourage you to just reject this proposal to rezone it, and that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Underwood, you'll have about 2.5 minutes for rebuttal. Clock kept on going, so I apologize for that.
Just for clarification, you said I had the last word. I didn't know if anybody else wanted to speak again.
Was there anybody else that come in? But if you have to remain about 2.5 minutes for rebuttal. So I'll let this go down, and then we'll just take it from the 10.
Well, Jim, I think we've covered most of our case. We've made multiple proposals, and I'll make the same proposal to you. We think that it makes the most sense to leave the roads where they're located. And one of the proposals we made to the neighbors is we said, what if we left at AG1? Would you be supportive of leaving the variances to facilitate the roads? And the answer has been no. That's a possibility. As stated, in order to leave the roads in the condition they are and in the location they are, then we would have to require variances, but it could still be left in the AG1. We're still in a situation, as stated, that the neighbors have said, we don't like the roads that close. They can be moved, and economically they may have to be if we can't get this approved. But what we would propose to you again is that the AG1 minimum standards are not nearly as protective as what we're proposing. And I think it could be truly less preserving of property values than to say, all right, this is the layout we could work with, but if the concern is it's going to open the floodgates, certainly we're not going to facilitate multifamily housing. We're agreeable to conditions to prevent that, even though the CUP zoning allows that on a case-by-case basis if approved by the City Council. Now, as far as meeting, we have been willing and have actually asked to meet on multiple more occasions with the neighbors. We're happy to do that again between now and City Council. Our client travels, but we've sent his engineer, me as his attorney, and also his site development manager, so the folks who will be telling exactly what's going on a day-to-day basis. We appreciate everyone's concerns. We truly do, and want to be good neighbors, but we think the best way to preserve everyone's interest in the lake, in the road locations, and their quality of life that they have is the proposal that we've made. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Just for the sake of the record, I haven't heard that you are requesting a deferral. Is that in fact what you're requesting?
We did request that. I know that we've had I guess, public hearing. You're saying the decision could be deferred? Is that what you're?
We can't. I guess we could entertain a deferral, but I want to make sure I understand what you're requesting. Are you requesting approval, or are you requesting a deferral?
At this point, we're asking for approval. What we thought, but the best case would be to, if we had to go back and re-advertise for a larger variance, it would make more sense to re-advertise for that and then bring that forward to you. But since we've already come with a public hearing, I think we've said what we can.
Just for clarity, so that we don't mislead you, and Kathy or Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you request approval and you're denied, then you can't come back for how long?
It's 12 months or substantial change.
Okay.
Within 6 months.
And that's denial by the City Council?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else from you, or we're
Just
going to?
if the commission has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay.
I move we
Close public.
Close public comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who made the motion to?
All did, and Joe seconded. Public comments closed. Let's open it up to questions for staff first. Whomever has questions.
Paul? I don't have any. Thank you.
Just the driveway / roadway slash whatever it is, that meets all the requirements for the fire department in terms of,
It does meet the minimum requirements for the turnaround if they develop the cul-de-sac at the end. It does not meet, we're not convinced that it would meet the standards for a street, for the dimensions and the geometry of the street. So even if they were granted the variances, they'd still, their engineer would have to show that they could meet all the standards for public works for a street, because it doesn't matter whether it's public or private.
right, right.
It wouldn't have been granted permits if a fire truck couldn't have gotten back there to begin
Right.
with.
And the issue with the septic thing, it seems to me that that's a killer. I mean, if the lots aren't big enough to get a septic in there, then we're done. All of this, everything is moot at that point.
That's true, but part of the problem is most developers will go ahead and do soil samplings and borings prior to submittal. And so we've requested or asked the applicant, because it's such a tight fit with the lake and the buffers, that they go to Fulton County with their soil analysis and borings, and they have not done that, and that's what Fulton County has asked for. And therefore, we're, in some ways, you know, we're not definitive, but it just appears by the site plan with the lake, and that you cannot put septic fields in, per our city standards, you cannot put septic fields in the 75-foot impervious or the 50-foot stream buffer. So even though they could meet the literal law of 1 acre of usable land, it's hard to understand whether the land would perk and that there would be sufficient area. So again, we're not the experts, so we've asked the developer to take their plans to Fulton County Health Department and show us otherwise.
But, I mean, we could go through all of this and approve it, and city council approve, and then Fulton County come along and say, we can't do that.
Exactly.
That's true, but there's no requirement that they go to Fulton County. Right. It's chicken and the egg.
Right.
Joe, anything else? Mark?
No.
Chris?
No.
Terry?
George, I do have one question.
Sure.
Occurred to me, for the applicant.
Well, let's just deal with staff first, if we
Okay.
could. Two questions for staff. You had said that they had requested a deferral. What was the basis for the deferral? It was just the 10-foot right-of-way setback on the roads if they go that?
Correct, for the variance request, yes.
In the write-up and in Kathy's presentation, you also noted the fact that they had not submitted a tree survey, and a tree survey is a required part of the application.
Yes.
In that respect, is their application not deficient from the get-go?
Yes.
Okay. We've been down this road, I don't know how many times with usable and how we define that, but I was always in the impression that we define usable to exclude buffers, and I must admit I can't find the specific language in the ordinance, but if they were to go to Fulton County to get approval for the site because it perks properly, are they going to require a variance in order to be able to go ahead, given the fact that they don't technically have 1 acre usable land?
When we refer to usable, that's the definition of the Fulton County Health Department.
Is that it perks?
The usable, and I believe that we quoted it in the staff presentation.
Yeah, you did.
And so there is some discrepancy. I mean, I guess there's some room for interpretation. Obviously, water is not, you can't have it in water. I think even above that, it's a matter of some areas are fairly swampy, and, you know, is it actually going to perk? Is it going to be the right soils? And because there's so little usable area, I think that's where, again, we're not the experts.
Right.
But it just appears there could be problems with it.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I have one. Mr. Underwood, can you address the water flow for me? Is it a spring-fed pond that's there?
There are actually multiple streams that feed it.
Streams or springs?
My understanding is they're streams. I'm not sure of springs that are feeding it, but they're coming in from the south of the property. And you can see on the, that there's, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3 different main lines that converge into the lake.
Okay, and do we know how much water movement actually takes place through the pond?
I'm not certain, sir.
I looked at the pond today, and it's got a really nice vegetation growth taking place over the top of it in the current weather conditions.
I haven't been down there in a few weeks. I was told that myself.
It's quite remarkable and quite
Not
vibrant.
in a positive way.
No, not in a positive way. So I'm concerned about just the safety, health, and welfare of the community when you're talking about the kinds of things that potentially could grow there, mosquitoes, kinds of infectious diseases that can come from that. We're talking about subjecting homeowners to literally living on top of that water if it's not moving. It doesn't appear to be moving to the point where we can create a healthy environment there. The other question I would have actually is, now that you've mentioned the 3 different stream feeds, Robin, are there, I'm not sure looking at the map, but all the setbacks from the stream feeds are met as well, are they?
That's interesting, because I did pull up Fulton County's description of setbacks for different items. It does say Boardwell Springs, existing, proposed, or abandoned, minimum separation feet for the absorption field should be 100 feet. So that was a question that I had. If we knew exactly where the springs were located, then the fields would need to be 100 feet, which even exceeds a 75-foot.
Right. Okay, so there is a question mark there as well, obviously. That's all I have, George.
Well, we certainly would have to comply with any engineering standards. We're not required to go fully engineer the site prior to zoning. We're recognizing all 75-foot setbacks. We're not asking for any variances for it. If I may, with regard to the trees, we submitted our application. It was accepted by the City of Milton. Our understanding was that a tree survey had already been submitted. On last Thursday night, we got the staff report back and says, you guys don't have a tree survey. So I don't think it's quite fair to say, well, your application is void from the inception when we've been working for 2 months, working with neighbors, working with staff, and we were just notified and said, hey, guys, apparently you're missing something that we told you had when you submitted, that you satisfied. So we would respectfully like to proceed at least with the decision.
Just for clarity, you were told that you didn't need to submit it, or you assume you didn't need to submit it?
When we do go through a pre-application meeting, we do a check down. All the materials they're supposed to submit. And that was our understanding, that it was sufficient.
But if you didn't do it,
My understanding, and I again, this is something I think we still need to work out with staff, is that a tree survey was submitted when the 10-lot development was approved.
That is not true. I checked with our plan review engineer, and I asked him specifically, and I checked with the arborist, and there was no tree survey submitted with the platted subdivision. That's not a necessary document to plat a subdivision. It is for a land disturbance permit, but not for a platted subdivision.
Has there been a land disturbance permit issued?
I think under Fulton County there was.
Then that's what the tree survey is.
Joe?
could I ask, who is the landowner?
It's a family. The Red Road LLC is the property owner. It's been with a group of different folks, and they've changed hands and different entities as different partners have fallen off.
Okay, well, some of the documents talk about Bentwater. This land map talks about Bentwater LLC as being the property owner.
It was. It's the former owner. Some of the partners have dropped out of that entity. A new entity was formed, which was Red Road Properties LLC.
And that's who owns it now?
Yes, sir.
And looking at some of the documents, there's none of the partners have signed any of these documents. It's somebody who's listed as a manager. Who is that person?
I'm sorry? Which documents? are you referring to?
Any of the documents that are signed on behalf of Red Road LLC. Are not signed
Liz
by-
Anderson is the property manager.
Who?
Liz Anderson. She has authority to act on behalf of the LLC.
Okay, they're not, that's not the name. I'm seeing somebody,
We can't.
Bottom or Batum or something like that.
I can't even read this.
Julian Bradham.
There is a gentleman named Brad that I work with who's with Red Road Properties. I'm not certain exactly what his okay. I do know how he has authority to act on behalf of the company. But
He
I'm
does?
not- yes, sir.
How do you know?
That's what was represented to me. I could bore you with discussions of a parent agency, but I think if someone who puts forward
Well,
that.
I'm a little bit familiar with that, but
Okay,
as
yeah.
a representative attorney for the LLC, it seems to me to be something that you would want to know if this person is authorized to sign a disclosure form on behalf of the LLC.
Well, at some point, you have to trust your client that they're
Well, I think under the rules of law, the trust has little to do with it.
Mark, is Red Road the entity that actually started this? Well, those same partners or somebody else completely different?
some of the partners, yes.
Some of the partners started that? And I have a problem with the septic because I live in a neighborhood that's an acre and a half and of fully usable land for the most part, and at least in that subdivision, 10 septic fields failed. And it took a long time to find a place somewhere else on the property that they had room. And I live next to one, and it's horrible. And it took them a couple months. And it just doesn't seem, if a septic field fails, you've only got one shot.
Well, there is a room for replacement field, but again, that's you roll the dice when you're doing the development business. When we take the risk. What we're asking you to do is say, does this comply with the Milton Comprehensive Plan? And then if we get in there and the topography and the environmental factors are not what we think they are, then we lose lots.
Chris?
No.
I've got a few. First, for the record, I want the record to reflect that back on June 6th, Mr. Underwood sent me an email asking me to discuss this matter with him prior to tonight's meeting, and I circulated it to everybody else on the Planning Commission, but I have not spoken to Mr. Underwood until tonight. Is the lake the stormwater basin as well?
Yes, sir.
What are you anticipating the price point to be for the lots themselves? You indicated $750 for the developed house. What's the price point for the lots?
Not certain exactly what the lot sells. But the intention is to contract with the builder, and the builder, they sell them as a unit.
And with all the changes in the ownership of the property for these various LLCs, has there been an official sale of the property in each case?
My understanding is there's been a conveyance of the property, so it's titled properly, yes.
Okay. What latitude, Kathy, I'm putting you and Robin on the spot, but what latitude, if any, do they have to reduce the size of this lake without going through a fairly extensive permitting process to do that?
I think it would be a fairly extensive permitting process to do that.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I mean, I personally, we need to kind of go back, I think, and it's been implied by the residents that are here in opposition, but, you know, one of the objectives of a community use plan is to maximize, and I'm reading right out of the ordinance, to preserve the natural amenities of the land by encouraging scenic and functional open areas. The idea that you would suggest reducing the size of the lake to accommodate that, to me, seems inconsistent with what the CUP is intended for in the first place.
No, so that's the alternative to the CUP. The CUP's inside, it's like if you're familiar with the concept of conservation subdivisions, preserve the natural amenities and do smaller lots in order to do so. The alternative is that if we can't do the CUP, then our client has to look at
But this isn't.
how do they make it work.
But this isn't a conservation subdivision.
No, sir, but it's a similar principle. And we're not looking to reduce the lake and ask for a CUP. We're saying that that's maybe the alternative if the CUP is not approved.
Okay. The only other thing, I guess, is do you have any idea how big these lots are once you've taken out the impervious? I mean, as I look at this drawing, all the lot lines, the back lot lines, regardless of whether it's on the east side or the west side, are all the way out in the lake. So there's clearly at least part of the lake itself that's been included in these lots that you've defined as being 1.1, 1.1, 1.1, 1.1. What is the actual lot size that is, by using my definition, if you say usable land and you take out the impervious and you take out the lake itself, how much are these lots? What is the size of the lots that's remaining?
Well, we'll agree that the lake cannot be counted toward usable land. We don't agree that the buffer and the impervious surface does not count toward that for health department. So in that regard, there's at least 1 acre of usable land. But I think there's obviously disagreement between us and staff, and we're working with the health department to resolve that as to what is the usable land.
Okay.
But that, candidly, we can't change that. We can't get a variance to that. And in Fulton County regulations, you have to have 1 acre of usable land in order to use septic sewer solution.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Any questions for the opposition or the residents that are here?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Nope. Okay. Discussion. Discussion. Thoughts? We ready for a motion? Sure. You guys are usually not this quiet. Go ahead.
I move for denial of RZ 12-07 and VC 12-04, parts 1 through 3.
I'll second that.
Discussion.
I would actually be based on staff's recommendations.
For whatever it's worth, I mean, I personally agree with you. I think that if they are able to, or successful to get these lots to perk, then that's something, it's a different process. It has nothing to do with us, and that's something that they can pursue. But I don't see any evidence in anything that they presented that would justify changing the zoning if they've already been granted, except for the fact that it gives them more lots. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Robin, you want to call the next item, please?
Okay, the next item is update and discussion of the code enforcement matrix that has been multiple times deferred.
Okay.
And I think Kathy has another item after that to discuss as well.
Okay, we all should have in front of us the letter from Robin dated March 20th, which really is providing the city attorney's opinion as to how these this enforcement matrix could be used, which is in the context, I guess, of what I would call advice or guidance to the magistrate. There's also a memo that I think you all have dated February 24th that it talks about the largest fine allowed for each offense is $1,000. And so to me, one of the questions we got to talk about is, what constitutes an independent and separate offense versus an ongoing offense. And Kathy and Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is if we wanted something to be categorized as a separate offense, it means that the enforcement officer is going to have to go out and literally cite the violator each time in order to make it a new offense. We can't cite it once and then say each day is a separate offense. It's got to be cited each time. And in order to adhere to your procedure, does each time beyond the first citation require an opportunity to cure again, or is it an automatic citation the second, third time? That was a question. I don't know the answer to that.
I'm not sure I understand it.
Okay, enforcement officer goes out, talks to somebody about the violation. In our approach to try and be, considerate, we give them an opportunity to cure. They don't cure, so we cite them. They still don't fix it.
Well, they don't cure. You give them the opportunity to cure.
Right.
Then the officer has to go back
Right.
to determine whether the cure has been.
Right, but so let's assume they don't cure, and the officer goes back, determines they haven't cured, and so he or she cites them. So that's one citation. If they still do not fix it, do they have to go through the notice, cure process again, or can the second citation be the very next day when it hasn't, assuming we give them 24 hours to fix
Well,
it?
the process is, don't forget, first is a verbal warning, and you give them a week. And
Right.
then you go back, and you give them a written warning, and you give them another week. Then you go back and you give them a citation. The
Right.
citation has a court date on it.
Right,
So once you issue that citation, it is now out of our hands.
right,
It's now in the judge's hands.
right.
So he has to go to court, and he has to tell the judge why he hasn't been able to cure the
Violation.
offense.
Right.
Now, when I was in McDonough, we had a case where someone didn't cure, went to court, never cured it, and we would go back and we would cite him again, and then we would continue to cite him. And we ran up like 1,000 citations, basically, because he just wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. But in theory, you're supposed to be able to go to court, and the judge handles it, and then then the judge makes the determination if he wants to give him another week or a month or whatever. And after which, if he doesn't do it, he is in contempt of court. And it can be fined, it can be jailed, whatever the judge decides. That's the usual process.
But my question is, after we go through all that and he goes to court and he or she still doesn't cure, does our internal process of being generous and benevolent and giving them a warning and a written warning and time to cure start all over again, or?
Well, then we would go back to court and ask them to ask them to be in contempt of court because it hadn't been.
So
corrected.
we would cite them the second time, as whatever that time period is that the judge allowed for him to cure. If it's not cured, we would cite them again
No,
immediately.
then the judge can hold them in contempt, and we would go to the city solicitor and say, the time has expired, we would like you to hold him in contempt.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. What I'm still struggling with is what we're calling a second offense. In this case, you're talking about a second offense as adjudicated a second time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he the lawn grew back.
Right.
Okay? And so we start the whole thing over again.
Right. The issue for me is that, this is just me from my recollection of what we talked about before, it's not the second offense as in it's adjudicated a second time, it's putting the teeth in the ongoing violation that isn't cured because it's cheaper and easier not to.
That's absolutely correct, and a lot of times they will do that, they'll pay the fine.
Right.
And then they're allowed to continue to do it, and I've been through cases like that. And so we go back out again. So the idea is that then when he comes back into court the second time, the judge has already seen him once before, and he gives him a double fine, or he does something else. And that's sort of how it works through the system.
Yeah, and I think that's what we had talked about conceptually, although I think we talked about wanting it to be more of a defined, this is what it's going to be versus the judge has discretion and here's some ideas about what it might look like.
The part of the conversation that's missing for me that I think we had at one point was at the point that the code enforcement officer goes out and issues the citation, what I'm not remembering that I think I'm hearing tonight is that once the citation is issued, the next course of action is going to court. I thought that there was a discussion that we had at one point that after the opportunity that the code enforcement officer gave the violator an opportunity to cure, that they could go back and issue a second violation. So it's actually, if it was a $100 fine, they would go back and issue a second citation. They would now be subject to $200, have a chance to cure. If they didn't cure, they go back again, subject to $3. I don't know what that's what I'm remembering. I don't know what the trigger was to have it go to court.
It's the violation, it's the.
Citation.
It's a citation.
It's not a citation when your court date is.
Okay,
It's
so
not here. It's
so really
it's like
the
a speeding ticket.
so the scenario that I just described, where there's actually multiple visits by the code enforcement officer, we must have put that aside then at one
Well,
point.
sometimes a code enforcement officer, in theory, it's verbal warning, written warning,
Right.
citation. Sometimes the code enforcement officer will go and several times to be nice. And I've tried to really impress on the code enforcement officers that there's a process here, and they need to follow it pretty closely, that we don't need to spend a month going back time and time again to try and persuade someone to cut us off.
Right.
But that's the process, that's the due process that you need to follow. And the court will ask for those records when the citation is issued and the court hearing is held. But-
So what the enforcement officer is doing is, if the person is making an effort to correct the deficiency, then he's going back multiple times, and assuming he
has
didn't quite
latitude.
get it.
That's right, he has latitude.
Okay.
But if there's no,
Significant progress.
there's no progress made, then, he needs to move from step one
Yeah.
to step two to step
Right.
three. But a lot of times, someone doesn't know it, and it's gonna take them a while to get that sign down, because it's a big sign, and, you have to call a sign company, and, so we work through those things, okay? But once that citation is issued, then
There's
it's
a
the
court
point where he tells it to the judge, we are out of it.
What I'm struggling with, Kathy, and this goes to the current violation and penalty ordinance, that what's codified right now. It says each day's continuance of a violation shall be considered a separate offense. And so when I look at that, and then I look at the matrix that's been put together, and it's got first offense, second offense, third offense, I'm having trouble reconciling that with having to go to court and go through that whole process, because that says that if it's a continuance of a violation, even one day, that's a second offense, and each one after that is a separate offense.
Well, that may apply after the judge has made his ruling and nothing has happened, and he gives him a certain amount of time, and then we can go back and then cite him again, and continue to cite him. I think.
Well, I think in my original memo, I did speak to that the proposed code enforcement matrix is provided.
Which one, Robin? The
I
one
think
back in February?
In February, it says, on the second paragraph,
But I think when I'm talking about the first, second, third offense, it's that guy who continues to put up that sign illegally, and even if he goes to court and does it and it's fine, then he'll do it again and he'll do it.
Well, Robin's memo does answer the question. It says city staff may issue a citation for every day until the offense is corrected or go to the offender, so that each citation would have its own day in court in theory. I mean, it's
We
like
don't
issuing,
do
it's
that
like,
to-
Yeah.
no, but I mean, it's like issuing a parking ticket, right? You don't get an opportunity to cure a parking ticket if
You
you're,
keep on
if you're
sitting
there
in
the
the
second
parking
time the parking officer comes by, you're gonna get a second ticket. The fact that it's there from the first time doesn't relieve you of that risk, right?
I mean, I think that we typically don't, it's very rare that we'll go out time after time after time to issue a citation.
Whether we do or not, or whether we have the right to is all
I mean, I can double check on that, but that was the original statement. It's just, I mean, I do know that Jimmy talks about for soil erosion control problems, because that's a really big deal, that if somebody's not curing it or
Yeah, it's
fixing it.
too late by the time they
he
fix
go-
it.
I mean, if anything gets recited, it would be some sort of erosion control issue, so.
Yeah, but I think that's in a different state.
For me personally, I want to try and make sure we're clear on this, because
Okay.
again, whether we
Check
do
that
it or
out.
not is a different issue. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what our rights are.
Well, maybe just defining what a second offense and a third offense is should be part of the whole thing. That way, there's no question.
But I think the thing is that, as I understand it, this has nothing to do with the citations or the violations.
Right.
has
This is for the judge.
Right, this is only to do
Right.
what comes before the judge, so.
But using the parking ticket example, right, if you park your car illegally and you park it illegally in the same spot for 5 days, technically I can cite you 5
Right.
times,
You
and
can.
that's 5 separate violations that all
Right.
have to be adjudicated separately.
Right, exactly.
And each one of them would be subject to these,
Right, but I think that's what this
Okay.
ordinance is saying.
okay.
Well, and I think when I first did the research, I think, well, this is my opinion, that the first, second, and third offense, just like if you have Mary Smith at 100 Main Street, and she doesn't cut her grass, so the first time it gets adjudicated, and the judge gives her $200 fine. Then the next summer, or in the fall, the same thing happens again, and she gets another citation, and it's adjudicated again, then he goes to the second offense. Okay, it doubles, kind of like what Kathy was speaking to.
Right, but that's because theoretically the first one's been cured.
Correct.
Yes.
But I think that's the way that we interpreted this to be used, as multiple offenses, not, okay, you got cited like a parking ticket, one after another after another. I mean, I guess it could be
But each
applied
one of them
that
is a
way.
separate offense.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, but I'm just, I mean, I don't think that's
well,
really
you-
the intent. I think the intent is somebody who is cited, they resolve it, but then they're not very,
No,
you know.
I think you're adding some things, Robin, that, I'm not walking away with that interpretation of how we got here. I'm working with the assumption that it can be repeated in a very short window.
Yeah, I think if you are in your scenario, that a judge is going to be very hesitant about saying that if they clean it up the first time, come back the second year, 6 months later or a year later, he's not going to consider that a second offense. I think you're misinterpreting that.
Well, that's something
He
that
can
we've been
do
talking to
whatever
the
he
code
wants,
enforcement
regardless
officers
of
to
what
give
we
a
recommend.
review, that we've talked to the city solicitor, because they don't know what's happened, aren't always even familiar with the zoning code, and so they've asked us to do a little report each time an offender comes to them. So for instance, especially with the arborist, if you have a tree cutter or a tree person who keeps on multiple times going against the tree ordinance, then Mark can say to the judge, okay, this is A&A tree, and he came into your court on January, and this is March, and he has another offense. I mean, I believe that that was the intent of this first, second, and third, because you've got repeat offenders. But,
Well, again, I mean, going back to your example on the grass or the signs or anything, I mean, my belief of what we wanted, if I remember our conversation, if I've got a sign in the window that violates the sign ordinance, and the enforcement officer cites me and says, you've got 3 days to take it down, and 3 days go by and I haven't taken it down, then he can cite it again 3 days later. It doesn't mean that it goes to, it doesn't mean we wait to go to court. He can cite it as a separate offense until it's fixed.
Right.
and that's what we can double check on.
Yeah, okay. So procedurally, we gotta get that nailed down. Do we wanna
I
talk?
would just add,
Sure.
George, if you don't mind, is that's our intent. I
Right.
think that's the intent
Right.
of the majority of the table.
Well, that's what's
up
already
here.
in the zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's what I'd like to have clarified, is that how do we accommodate the intent of what we're requesting?
Yeah, this was only intended to be a guideline for when they eventually get to court, if they get to court, for the magistrate to be able to have some consistency in terms of what he fines people for similar violations.
So what you're saying is if you see, if what you all as a body, it seems there's a majority opinion, that if somebody's in a fence and they don't fix it right away, even
They
though
don't fix it with within whatever
Right.
time the enforcement officer allowed them to
Right,
have.
but then they have a court date because they get a citation. And they still haven't fixed it between the time of the citation and let's say a month later to the court date, that you would like to see this code enforcement officer cite them multiple times.
Right, we're not-
Until they fix
Keep,
it.
keep the court date out of it, that's a
Right.
separate process. If the.
But that's
if
an
the-
end date, that's kind of like a sunset.
But if the enforcement officer says, you ought to be able to fix this in 24 hours, and he goes back 24 hours later and it's not fixed, he ought to cite them again. I mean, it's up to us as to whether we want to send him back to do that, but he ought to have the right to cite them again.
Well, that's what we have to get clarification on, 'cause I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
They can.
You know, if you think about the potential motivation there, if the site, if the code enforcement officer has made a judgment on the individual who's the violator and said that I believe that an appropriate time to cure this is a week, and he goes back, and it's not cured, a second citation, in my mind, should be an appropriate course of action at that point, to the point where it gives him another week to do it. He goes back again. Now, again, the enforcement officer should have the opportunity to cite the person again. So it'd be, at that point, 3 visits, 2 citations. By the time it gets to court, the code enforcement officer, who may have to appear, can be saying, I gave the guy 3 windows of opportunity to cure,
Right.
cited him twice, he's still in violation.
It's a scofflaw.
Yeah. I think that's the spirit of which I'd like to see it go forward.
Okay, let's talk about the specifics of what's
Can I
in
just
here.
propose just one other
Sure,
thing?
Mark.
'Cause I don't know if you can, if you did the citation and we put something like you know, until it's cured, it's $50 a day up to $1,000. Instead of, going back out, he calls one time, says, I fixed it, and the guy, and our guy goes out and he says, okay, it was 20 days in violation times $50, and you maxed out and you owe $1,000. Just as another.
Well, I think we talked about that before, and again, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Ken said is that we don't have the right to assess those numbers.
It's not
That
like
can
a
only be
right.
done by the court.
Right.
Okay, so I guess there's 2 questions with respect to the matrix that's been put in front of us. One is there any violation that you can think of that we haven't dealt with here that we should deal with? And 2, does the proposed fine schedule here make sense?
Well, I think if I can just offer, there's a few things that are incorrect based on the adoption of the new sign ordinance. So, this was done prior to the adoption. So,
Okay.
that those items need to be corrected as far as percentages of window signs and all that kind of stuff.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. You're right. Well,
But, I mean,
then
that's,
aside
we
from
can
being,
clean
aside
that
from
up.
being technically correct, are there any other
Wasn't there,
violations that are missing from here?
Yeah, didn't we have something about demolition at one point without permit? I'm not seeing demolition without permit in here.
I mean, that would basically be like, the
Well, we got
demolition.
construction
We can
without a
have that.
building permit, so you're talking about demolition without a demolition permit.
Right.
Okay.
So I think something that, like demolition or tree cutting should be,
So there's,
put it at a maximum, the maximum.
Removal of specimen trees.
Yeah,
and
tree
trees.
cutting
Off
is
the
in
bat,
here.
because there's no reversing that.
Yeah.
No, they're here.
Trees is in here.
No, but I'm saying, once they cut that tree down,
There's a recompense. I mean, you can't put the tree back, you're
Yeah.
right, but there's a recompense as an alternative. I mean, to pay for it. I mean, like you said, you can't, once it's down, it's
if
down.
a specimen tree is down, it should be $1,000.
well, and that's, I mean,
You can't replace it.
Yeah.
You knock a building down without a demolition permit, it should be a maximum.
Yeah,
No,
we've had
you
that.
can't go back.
So, Mark, are you suggesting that regardless of what's first, second, or third offense, that for removal of a specimen tree, the recompense ought to be $1,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything that's irreversible,
Okay.
I think should be at the maximum.
So let me play devil's advocate with a demolition permit. We have a lot of demolition permits are for just accessory structures, structures that really need to be demolished. I mean, do you wanna say, I mean, we're not talking about historic structure. I mean, obviously, maybe we could make, I don't think we can define it. There isn't really a difference right now between historic and a demolition of historic and just a demolition. Not until we start, so HPC designates building as historic, and I think at that point in time, we can make a separate.
Is that when Fulton County
When
has
is
to-
the
Fulton County has to
demolition
hurry?
permit required?
Yeah.
Huh?
Fulton County has to hurry?
Yeah.
And also accessory to the main structure too. I mean, there's lots of, some sheds need to be torn
Well, no,
down.
maybe not demo, but I mean, I'm more concerned like with the tree, like specimen
When
trees, things
when is
that
the
are done.
demolition permit required under the current ordinance?
Anytime there's a demolition.
So that
I
answers
mean,
the question.
literally, I mean, if it's, if it's a structure, I mean, people have come in for sheds, people have come in for old barns or barns that are dilapidated. I mean, there's things, they've come in for 1970s houses, they've come in for, I mean, a lot of different demolitions and, so.
Well, demolition is a demolition.
Yeah, if it's required, if the permit's
No, and
required,
I don't
then.
disagree that they need a permit, because there's certain requirements for vermin letter and asbestos. I mean, I don't disagree that there shouldn't be, but I just also want to say that not all demolitions are
Well, but,
equal.
but at the end of the day, the judge is gonna decide
Right.
that, right?
Right, yes.
One thing that's missing.
Are we
for
talking,
me-
we are adding a demolition?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I would
And
say
if you want
yes.
to put a range, 250 to 1,000, you can, depending on the severity.
Sure.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a set number. I mean, a range would do as well.
Or you can put a set number and the judge can use his discretion. Rather
Well,
than.
that's what he will do. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not gonna look at this and say, oh, it's $300. I mean, it's
Yeah.
up to $1,000 already by law.
What about noise?
Yep, that could be, a noise, yes, we can add noise.
There was also light, night
The,
sky,
Night sky ordinance.
yeah. The one that we talked about a lot that I don't see here is a violation of or operation of a use that's not permitted.
Okay, well, what happens is if the code enforcement officer, if, for instance, we found a party house, or was reports of party house.
This is a hypothetical.
No, this is real.
No, this is real. This is not.
Okay, this is real, okay. And so basically, we found a use permit if they so choose to continue on with this party, or basically their use that they're doing. And so basically what the officer, code enforcement officer will go out there and give them a warning and saying, this is the use that you're doing. So you need to come in and apply for it. And it's a little bit different with, if for instance, the landscaping business, they were cited and they were said, okay, you need to come in and apply for a use permit. Same thing with this other use. Well, once they come in to apply for the use permit, everything is at a stay, so they don't get fined. So either they need to stop and cease their use, or they need to come in and get a use permit or fix the zoning.
Understand, but what's not here is that example, because if they don't stop and they don't come in for a permit, then they ought to be fined.
Correct.
Because I mean, you're saying they've got two alternatives, and they do, but
Right.
if they don't choose one or
to
the other,
apply, yes,
yeah,
you're right, okay,
So it's operating illegal use.
right.
yeah. I just want, if they ended up coming in, let's say it's their court date, and they said, okay, we're gonna apply in a week, and then the
Right.
judge, whatever, works with them.
Right.
And I can't really put a code section well, I'll have to look, but, you know.
I
every
don't think there's a
situation-
single code section.
Right, that's what I'm saying, everything
Yeah.
would be a different code.
I think operating a party house without inviting the planning commission ought to be.
They even have a little amphitheater from what I understand.
And what is that address?
That's what I really want to know.
Meeting adjourned, we'll
I
check it
thought it
out.
was George's house.
Yeah, right, I got an amphitheater in my house. What else, guys? Anything else on this? Hearing nothing. Robin, how can we get this cleaned up, both in terms of understanding the process and also the citations in the matrix itself, the code citation?
Well, I mean, I can work on the code sections with the items that are, you know, not quite correct, and then go back and look for the ones that you've added. I mean, that's a pretty easy thing. As far as we can go back and figure out what is the appropriate and legal way to do citations, whether it's, you know, multiple citations prior to the court date, if that's acceptable from a legal point of view, and so we can follow up on that.
Okay. Is it reasonable that we could have this back at the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Right, you're just gonna have 4 text amendments next time,
Oh, okay.
so no revisions.
What are they?
Historic preservation.
Yeah.
Well, one of them is a sunset rule for building permits.
That's ceasing to be funny.
I'm sorry, not for building permits, but for land disturbance permits. A sunset rule, so that if they've started work, they have to finish by a certain time. And then,
That's all right.
I can't remember off the top of my head exactly.
Exotic animals, I think is
Yes,
one of them.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exotic animals, that's what I think it's up on the,
It was, I saw it in the paper.
yeah.
Okay.
You read the paper?
Every week, just to see what we're doing.
I know.
I read it for 2 reasons, to see what we're doing and see how many misspellings I can find.
Not ready to find out who's being locked up.
In my advertising or in the whole paper?
No, I don't know whether you remember the article, but it was probably 2 months ago, and I can't even remember what the guy's name was. It was one of the guys that was behind the origination of the Milton Grows Green movement.
Okay.
And Jonathan Copsey did a feature article on him with a picture and everything, and first of all, he misspelled the guy's name. Second of all, in his banner headline, he's misspelled Milton. He left the L out. He left the L out.
Listen, we live in a new place.
City of
Okay.
Milton.
So I think Kathy wanted to speak to another subject.
Yeah, I just some updates, what was going on. We're done with the form-based code grab out with a few years ago. Part of the contract that Caleb Brassico, Chanel Smith, and Walsh had was not only to do the form-based code, but to go back and we've talked to the ARC and we've created an LCI plan for crabapple, because when we went through that whole process, we didn't do it through the Little Bowl Centers Initiative program from ARC. The city just hired Lou Oliver and came in and did a master plan, and then from there we did the form-based code zoning. The advantage to having it come through, and most plans like the one we just did for Deerfield, comes through the LCI process, which is a program of ARC. And the reason communities like to do that is because if you have in place an official document of an LCI plan, you're then eligible for future transportation improvement money for that particular planning area. And when we did Crabapple, we didn't do it as an LCI. So ARC will allow you, if you want to use your own money, to create the template and to come up with the LCI plan for an area. They'll grandfather it in, and then it'll be there available. So if you want to apply for some future transportation money, you can. So when we hired Caleb to do the form-based code, we agreed that part of the contract would include him going back and creating the LCI plan for the Crabapple area. So the draft has just arrived, sitting on my desk. So you'll be seeing it. It'll go through the process. We'll bring it through the planning commission and out to the council so it can be formally approved. So we'll have an official LCI plan for the Crabapple area.
So the only difference between that and the Highway 9 plan is the fact that it wasn't funded by an LCI grant.
That is correct.
Okay.
We don't have all the
Yeah, but
requirements in it.
Are we convinced today that the crabapple plan will be compliant with the LCI requirements?
You already know that.
Yes, we've
We are.
already met with them.
Okay.
So it's
I thought
almost
I
a
originally-
formality.
Yeah, that's great news, because I originally thought that there were some components that we were concerned, one of the reasons we didn't do an LCI was we were concerned about some of the things we were trying to do. Pardon?
No, I don't know why they didn't, it's because, you know, the application is only once a year, and it's competitive, and not everyone gets funded.
Right.
So it was pre my time, but I suspected
They just
they
didn't think
bit the
they'd get
bullet and decided to fund it. So that's what happened. So anyway, so that's going on, so just to let you know. The next thing that's going on is, and let me just pull this over, this is, as you know, this is the, it's the latest LCI plan that we just finished for the Deerfield area, which is officially called the Highway 9/Georgia 400 Master Plan. And this is the area, and within this area, there are, it's divided into sub-areas. And, this yellow is one sub-area, and the orange along Highway 9 is another sub-area. And then over here along 400, there are really two sub-areas. It's hard to see, but the line is right here. This purple area has been designated a regional activity center. And then this area up here is essentially a transitional area. So I'd like to talk a little about this area right from here down, which was designated as the regional activity center. I'm moving forward with proposals to essentially start for this area what we just completed in Crabapple, i.e. a form-based code and a transfer of development rights ordinance to implement this plan as it relates to here. And the reason I've just pulled out the regional activity center is because this will be the more densely developed area. We've got the infrastructure there, we've got the mid-rise buildings. We really need to infill it, we really need to maximize the land there from a tax generation point of view. This area here is really the best area for any of our medium type of density development for the city. And so I'd like to do a form-based code to implement that. And Robin, if you want to come over and join us, discussion for a minute, please.
Kathy, does that area that you're pointing to continue all the way down south of Windward? Or does it stop at Windward?
It does come down south of Windward. This is an Alpharetta.
No, I know that,
Yes.
but I'm just saying that that's where I was going with that question.
Yeah, I have not talked to Diana Wheeler over in Alpharetta to see if they would like to join us in terms of that, but that's certainly a good point of view that I should ask her if she'd like to come into the area, you know, to join in terms of this. But so having said this, in terms of doing a form-based code for this area down, as we look at this Route 9, this orange area, we wanted to make sure that we weren't excluding that in terms of making sure that that can be implemented, the intent of this plan can be implemented. And when we looked at the zoning that was in place for that area, you have a Route 9 overlay zone, which includes an extensive set of design guidelines. But we really felt that it was adequately taken care of. And for us to put another overlay on top of the existing overlay with the new design guidelines that were put in place, that it could be overkill. However, there was one issue, and Robin, why don't you speak for it? It was your thought, and I thought it was a good thought. And we wanted to see if you thought it was worth pursuing as we move forward with the form-based code, as we look at the existing zoning for the Route 9 area. There's one facet that we think you may want to think about.
So I think, as you all remember, when we first were incorporated, C1 allows for 4 stories, 40 feet, 45 feet, whatever it is. And so I think it may be time to look at the ordinance to get rid of it.
Right, to get rid of the current requirement.
The current requirement of 2 stories, 30 feet to the eave. I mean, obviously, we didn't have it for Morris and Windward, but to basically delete that out and to replace it with something that was comparable to what Crabapple has with their height requirements, so that we can maybe, we don't have to throw out the baby with bathwater with our overlay, kind of encourage more higher density, because I think even with the visual
More vertical,
survey.
more vertical density.
Right, and I think the visual survey that was done by Urban Collage, everybody really liked those three-story building. I mean, it's just aesthetically more pleasing and blah, blah, blah. So I think that that was an idea that we had that might encourage some more development. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a good
so, again, what we have in the current overlay is
Do we have
a two-story
three-story
limitation.
Does Crabapple now include 3-story?
Actually, I think it's a little higher than that.
Crabapple allows 3 stories, and it's allowed, as the first story can be a minimum of 11 feet high to 25 feet.
Right,
And then the second and third story can be a maximum of 14 feet each.
okay.
And speaking of Crabapple, not to get off the top of it, I have hard copies for the approved form-based code if anybody wants that.
I do, because it's different than what you sent us, right?
Right,
Okay.
well, except for, everything should be the same except for that chart that
Except for
Sudi
table
and I
9?
looked at, yeah.
Well, I just need table 9 then, because I've got to.
Okay. And also, just as a note, again, is that in the ordinance, you'll see what I pass out to you only has a regulating plan, it doesn't have the TDR map on it, because the attorneys felt like that shouldn't be codified. I mean, it's just another map that is used as a tool for the TDR.
Right.
So it was not codified, and so when you look at it, you're like, hey, you forgot the other map. It's like, no, it was intended not to be codified with it.
Not to digress, and I apologize. but-
Anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
All right, I'd like to go back to this discussion, if I may, so we can close this down. So, the thought is that we're, currently, for Route 9, we're at 2 stories. And when we're doing the form-based code for the regional activity center, do you want us to proceed with changing the overlay for the Route 9 from a 2-story to a 3-story? In terms of
For the
encouraging
entire,
development in
for the
Route 9.
entire Route 9 overlay?
Yeah, I mean, that would include
Yeah.
the lower part, the little sections down here. And there was one, yeah, I mean, it could go up there. Or
Well-
we could say anything below Bethany Bend, I don't know, if you don't want something higher.
It's
North of
hard,
Bethany
if
Bend.
you're trying to figure out what the overlay says and you make more constraints on it, it becomes harder to read and harder to administer. So for simplicity's sake, it might be good just to include the whole thing. But I
Yeah,
guess.
but there's some single-family residential when you get further north.
Well, we could look at maybe everything not north of Bethany. I mean, right now, we have exclusions, so.
I mean, I agree with you for simplicity, we ought to just change the existing, but I personally wouldn't be comfortable saying it's allowed throughout the whole Highway 9 overlay.
Well, if you want to think about then, where
Okay.
you like it, but try to keep it simple. I think from administration as well as someone trying to figure it out from the
Okay.
outside, it's simple.
I have a different question. I mean, have we already checked, I mean, is Deerfield going to be willing to go along with form-based code?
When they have a set of covenants, clearly, you
Right.
have to be consistent with those covenants.
That's why I'm asking. I mean, are they going to be willing to, I mean, are we gonna have to do the form-based code to be consistent with their covenants, or are they gonna be willing to modify their covenants to be consistent with the form-based code? Because the constraints that covenants may place on the form-based code may not allow us to do what we want to do with the form-based code.
Well, we'll look into that, but clearly, the form-based code would be the better way of
Oh, I agree, yeah.
the intent of the plan. So I'm really gonna try and see if we can, but that's a concept.
Twist Adams are.
And we'll also have a TDR section, so there will be receiving areas that will be.
As long as we don't have to hear a presentation from Rick again.
Oh, I've got several.
You'll just conveniently be on vacation.
And then my idea would be to use the existing stakeholder committee that was used to develop this plan.
I heard every one of Rick's presentations. Don't tell me that. Painfully, I heard every one of them.
Oh,
He's so nice.
Now you understand it, right?
Being into you.
But anyway, so that's the plan, and I just wanted to apprise you of that. And so we'll get some feedback, we'll continue this conversation, we don't need to have your feedback tonight, but I would like to think about Route 9 and just drive up and down it to see.
All Are we gonna, as part of that process, are we gonna try and reach out to Forsyth and talk about what's gonna happen on the other side of 400?
On the other side of what?
The other side of 400,
You mean
up around McGinnis Ferry. Yeah.
Right there.
Well, our thought is if indeed they decided to put that interchange in, that this area then we would do an update to this plan that would be much more detailed with this area. We'd probably do it with Forsyth. And then we would hopefully do a form-based code for that area once we had a much more detailed plan. But I think that's.
They can
further
cooperate
down the
just
road.
like Alpharetta did with the inquiries and stuff.
Yeah.
Say, hey, go ahead, do it.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we don't like it.
Yeah, go ahead and do it, we don't care, we'll do what we want.
They, when I talked to them a couple of years ago, they wanted McGinnis Ferry to be a second windward.
Yeah.
That was their goal.
And then there's one more issue not related to this that's coming up, and we've been working with Dr. Jeffrey Dorfman from UGA, and he's doing a cost revenue. Well, you've been working with him too, but
No, I know that I and Mark Reed at least want to be part of that.
well, he's been working with the city on it in terms of coming up with the cost revenue. The idea being to see what is a land use cost the city in terms of cost of services vis-a-vis the amount of revenue generated from taxes and whatnot. And I know there was an exercise done as part of the comprehensive plan.
It was much more than an exercise.
That was here in life or
It
air.
was, yeah.
So,
There was
as part of
bloodletting
that
during
exercise, I'm gonna segue right into that. As part of that exercise, you all did an exercise that looked at all the undeveloped land in the city and determined how aggressively it should be developed in the future, because that was part of the model that he came up with.
Right.
Whoever that was who did it. Jeffrey Dorfman is asking for the same thing from the city now. And so we thought we were being very smart and said, well, you know what, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You guys all did it, or some of you did it the last time around. We'll just take that data and use it and give it to Dorfman, and he can put that into his model.
Which chart?
Well, it turns out that we found a major inconsistency in that you were using 5,200 acres that were undeveloped, and Dorfman is using 2,500 acres, half of what you were using. So I need to figure out what is correct, and then I'm gonna have to bring it back to you, I think.
For whatever it's worth, and you guys already know this, all the data that we used came from Michelle.
Right, yes, and we were working with Michelle on that. She pulled it all out. And you had two scenarios. One is aggressive development scenario,
Right.
one was a less aggressive development scenario. And Dorfman's asking the same thing.
Sure.
And so I really thought I could just use it, but he's using a much smaller amount of undeveloped land as a base than you are using. And so it may be that I need to bring it back to you all.
Is his number all undeveloped land, or is it just undeveloped AG1 land?
He forgot to put in the AG, right?
He didn't put in the AG, all he put in was the farmland.
You know, ours was all
Forestry
undeveloped
farm.
land.
And you also put in the AG, and that was the big difference. So
Right.
I need to reconcile that first, and then, so you'll see that. And unfortunately, it may be sooner than your next meeting, because there is a time issue here. So I just want to alert you to the
Okay.
fact that,
Is his work product going to be a financial model, though, that the city's gonna be able to use going forward, or is this just a one-time exercise?
No, it's a financial, you'll be able to plug in.
Okay.
The 23 acres of apartments that are being proposed for next door.
Okay.
What is that gonna generate in terms of taxes? What is it gonna cost in terms of services?
I don't wanna speak for anybody else, and those that were through it before probably will feel differently, but when we get to that point, I would like to request that those of us that would like to, I don't wanna make it an official meeting, but I'd like to request that those of us that would like to get to spend a meeting with him understanding that. And it can't be a planning commission meeting, we won't have enough time.
Yeah, no, I saw the preliminary, and it was a good hour presentation where he walked you through, and he showed you how we can plug in and what his software will be able to do the model and
Okay.
everything else. It's really very good. I worked with him in Roswell, we did the same thing in Roswell. So he's done this for many communities around the state.
Great.
For, you know, I can't, I guess it was in the paper, but the Charter Commission's work is over. There were a set of recommendations that were made to, interestingly enough, as it turned out, Jan was the only one that showed up. John Albers was sick, and so he called in on the phone. Chip Rogers never participated at all, and David Shaver never even responded to the invitation. So at the end of the day, and that was part of the issue, is with the transition in the redistricting, David won't be representing us anymore anyway, so he's kind of lost interest. But those recommendations were made, and it's just kind of up to Jan now to go forward. I don't know whether it's something you guys are interested in understanding or seeing, but if you are, I can get copies of that for you. I mean, probably the most interesting part of that you would be interested in is a recommendation that we move from 6 districts down to 3, and have 2 representatives in each district, so.
I'd be interested in seeing.
Okay. We need a motion.
I have a question first.
Sure.
We kind of got away from you before I had a chance to do that. With regard to the code enforcement, what's the status? Are we actively visiting sites these days? Are we actively?
I saw they replaced Brandon's sign with a smaller one.
That's still up for debate, right? Oh, I asked Chris about the
one right out in front of our place. They replaced the big one with a smaller one.
One to the right as you're going south?
Yeah.
Well, we've taken down 40 signs.
Because of location or size? The reason I hadn't planned on going there, we certainly can. I had a conversation with Chris, and one of the things we talked about was the last 2 elections, we had not allowed the larger signs. We were dealing with whatever those 2 by 2s, and there's obviously just some early, some early populating of some of the larger signs. So I posed the question to him, what are you going to do? And he said he hadn't thought about it. I said, well, the other thing you haven't thought about is the qualification period that used to be sort of the benchmark for when you could begin to put the signs up for local elections is very different than national. Qualifications, I think, is 90 days prior to an election, or no more than 120. And now we're dealing with, I think it's six months or a year for a national. So you could theoretically have national election signs up for a year.
I haven't seen any national ones yet.
There aren't any yet. We're just dealing with our state level right now. So again, he wasn't prepared to offer a conclusion to the casual questions I was asking of him. But he didn't give me an impression one way or the other as to how he was going to levy it. And I would tell you that I'm aware through third-party information that at least one of the candidates has been forward asking for permission of the city to say what size can I put up, and because there hadn't been a decision made, he's choosing to put the larger signs up.
Well, the one on from our place was too big.
That's what I said. It was third party to me.
It's in the sign code that it's 2 by 2.
So the bigger ones need to go down.
And they're 32 by.
The big ones can be put up with a permit.
Oh, good point. Oh, good point.
I guess technically, if you had a business or whatever would allow that size, they'd have to come, like you said, but none of these have permits. They're just like.
Well, no, but I mean, they could theoretically ask. I mean,
Yeah, because it's
hopefully
where
it would be
you
denied,
can't
but
control
they can-
content, so
yeah.
it's.
But-
Okay,
but
so
the
if
other
we are
thing is
in
they're all too
a
close to the road.
friendly response, yeah, they're all too close to the road, and they're also being mounted on
Yeah.
not allowed
Right.
structures. Those big steel stakes are not allowed anymore. So we just need to advise candidates that I think they're willing to, though at least the one that I'm aware of is willing to comply. We just need to tell them definitively that that's the case. Okay.
What if anything are we doing about the fence on the new Shell station on Highway 9 in Bethany?
What do you mean the fence? It's okay.
It
That was
is?
approved.
The crossbuck is
Yeah,
approved?
it's the way the ordinance reads, an equestrian type, we didn't define it had to be 4-board parallel.
I thought it did. I thought we said 3 or 4 board parallel.
No, it does not. In fact, I double checked before I said it. And the overlay talks about
We need to fix
wanting
that.
variety, because everything with the Deerfield, we have a cross fence, and we allow that to continue as a choice, so
Okay.
that's a correct fence.
So going back to my code enforcement question, are we out actively
Yes,
enforcing?
we are.
We just haven't made it to my side of town yet?
What is, Joe,
White
a lot
Hobbs.
what
I
is
only-
your-
I'm only
what is
asking
your
for
question?
two
What is your complaint?
Please enforce the sign ordinance at Birmingham Crossroads. There's multiple violations, any size, shape, or color, it's pretty much there. And then the other offender has gotten better, but it's still not in code.
Mr. Orchid?
Well, no, he's had him too. Mr. Orchid Farm, who never comes in to apply for his banners with you guys. He just puts them up, and they go on for a while, and they come down. But the other one is the darn horse farm.
Again,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, there's an offensive display at the post to the property, you know, at the entrance to the
what was
driveway.
that called again, which farm?
I don't remember the name of the
Bethany?
farm. It's on Hopewell,
Yeah.
just down the street from the large yellow.
Yeah, it's at Bethany Bend in Hopewell.
Yes, that's close enough.
Just north.
It's on the west side of the
Right.
street. It's got, for a while they had 5 signs up, like the
Little red ones.
Burma shave
Yeah.
signs. Now they're down to 2, which is less than allowed. They can have 3. But they've got a sign on the fence. They've got probably a 4x8 sign further, deeper in the yard. And they've got the offensive seasonal display. It's currently a reindeer, a wire reindeer. I think that's, anybody else I can think of that's up there? I mean, just Birmingham Crossroads, I mean, my goodness, the subway, the workout place, the blinking neon sign. And I know you're working with the other woman with the liquor store, but that's still, and my goodness, we do not need to be creatively interpreting the ordinance for what she's been doing. It just needs to go away, the neon sign. I don't care how deep it is in her store.
I thought they were closing down.
I don't know.
I'd heard that.
I don't want her to have to close down. I just want
No, I
follow the.
didn't mean it. All right,
So, thank you.
we need a movement to adjourn.
So
Motion to
moved.
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.